Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more fun English stories. Fluency in English is like a treasure chest. At first, you don't know exactly where it is or what it looks like, but once you find it, it's worth all the effort. When I first started learning English, I was terrified. I couldn't understand a word. My vocabulary was limited to hello and goodbye, and I thought I'd never be able to speak with confidence. But here's the thing about fluency: it's not a straight line, and it's certainly not a one-way road. It's more like a winding path with a bunch of detours, some bumps along the way, and maybe even a few unexpected detours into snack breaks. I remember thinking, why am I doing this to myself? But deep down, I wanted to get better, and over time I realized something magical: fluency doesn't happen in a day, or a week, or even a month. It takes years of practice, and that's okay. Fluency is like a plant. You have to water it every day, give it sunlight, maybe even talk to it once in a while. But don't overdo it. People will start to think you're weird. The important thing is keep growing it. I'll never forget one of my first English teachers. She had this really thick accent, and I had absolutely no idea what she was saying half the time. She could have been talking about the weather or telling us to run for our lives, and I wouldn't have known the difference. But one thing she said stuck with me. To speak English fluently, you have to do one thing every single day. I thought she meant study, but no, she meant practice. Practice, she said, makes perfect. And if she was right about anything, it was that. So, what do you think? Can fluency really be achieved if you just practice every day? Absolutely. Every small conversation you have, every song you listen to, every time you watch a TV show and try to repeat the lines, you're getting one step closer to fluency. But here's the thing: fluency is not about perfection. It's about being able to express yourself even when you make mistakes. And trust me, you will make mistakes, and that's perfectly fine. No one is going to judge you because you said, "I can has English" instead of "I can speak English." Unless, of course, you're talking to a grammar teacher who's having a really bad day. But let me take you on a little journey, the journey of one of my students, Jack. Jack started in my class as one of those shy, "I can't speak English at all" kind of people. You know the type: keeps to themselves, maybe says hi once in a while, but when it comes to actually speaking, they're like a deer caught in the headlights. Jack was really afraid of speaking English. He'd mumble when he had to answer a question, and you could almost hear the anxiety in his voice. I remember one day, Jack said to me, "What if I make a mistake?" And I looked him dead in the eye and said, "Mistakes? Mistakes are your best friends. They help you learn." He stared at me, a bit confused, and I explained, "If you're not making mistakes, you're not pushing yourself. It's like learning to ride a bike. If you never fall off, you're not going fast enough." I know, it's a cheesy analogy, but it worked. Slowly, Jack began to talk more, first in class, then with his classmates. By the end of the semester, he was speaking English like it was his second nature. His biggest breakthrough? Realizing that fluency is not about knowing every word, it's about making your ideas understood. Now let's talk about listening, one of the most overlooked aspects of fluency. You've probably heard people say, to speak fluently, you have to speak a lot. And yes, that's true, but listening? Well, it's just as important, if not more. Why? Because fluency isn't just about using the words you know. It's about understanding the words others use, the rhythm of speech, the way we naturally string sentences together. I had another student, Sophie, who was obsessed with watching English movies. Obsessed, I mean she'd watch a movie like 5 times a week, and I'm not talking about the Avengers or Harry Potter. Nope. Sophie loved watching old movies from the 50s, like Casablanca and Singin' in the Rain. It was hilarious. But here's the kicker: she started picking up all these new phrases and expressions that no one uses anymore. I remember one time she said, "I'm going to make a real go of it." And I just stared at her, completely confused. "What does that even mean, Sophie?" I asked. She smiled and said, "It's from an old movie. It means I'm going to try hard to succeed." Now, that was a lesson, not just about learning English, but about culture too. Listening to movies, even ones you don't understand at first, opens up so many layers of language and culture that textbooks never will. Let's talk about reading too. Reading, as we all know, is essential, but it's not just about reading things like The Cat in the Hat over and over. No, no. You've got to read material that challenges you. Novels, news articles, even text messages from your friends. If they're using big words, of course. Chris, one of my former students, was obsessed with reading newspapers in English. He would buy them every morning and read the entire thing, even if he didn't understand half the words. But here's the trick: he didn't care. He kept reading, kept guessing, kept learning. Eventually, after about 6 months, he said, "I can read these articles like they were written for me." And you know what? He was right. He started using more sophisticated vocabulary, and his writing improved too. But here's the thing: you don't have to be perfect at reading. My favorite advice is read a little, understand a little, and repeat. That's it. Little by little, you'll absorb the language, like how a sponge soaks up water, slowly but consistently. So go ahead, dive into that book that looks a little too difficult. I bet you'll learn a lot. Writing is also an important piece of the puzzle. Even if you don't consider yourself a writer, I'm telling you, writing in English helps more than you can imagine. Here's a fun fact. I actually used to write really bad poems in English when I was learning. Really bad, like cringeworthy bad. They rhymed in all the wrong places, and they didn't make sense. But here's what happened. Writing them, even though they were awful, helped me organize my thoughts in English. I could see my mistakes, and each time I improved a little bit. I had one student, Ahmed, who used to write short diaries in English every day. At first, it was super basic. I ate breakfast, I went to school, I watched TV. But over time, his sentences got longer, more detailed, and richer in vocabulary. Soon enough, he was writing entire pages filled with thoughts, feelings, and sometimes even humor. We laughed, we cried, it was an emotional roller coaster. And let's not forget the most important part of learning English: using it in real life. It's one thing to read textbooks, listen to podcasts, and watch movies, but it's another to speak in real-world situations. You can have all the grammar in your head, but if you don't use it, it won't stick. I can't tell you how many students I've had who were perfect on paper, but when it came time to speak, they froze. Why? Because they were afraid. But you know what? Speaking is the only way to truly improve. Get out there, talk to people, make mistakes, and laugh about it. The more you use English in your day-to-day life, the more naturally it will come to you. It's like playing a video game. The more you practice, the higher your score gets. So, what's the secret? Practice, listen, speak, read, write, and make mistakes. Fluency is a journey, not a destination. And guess what? You're already on your way. Keep practicing, and remember, the only real mistake you can make is not trying.